But I was not going to make that call. I crashed your F12. The relationship with Ferrari started on a program called Ferrari Driving Clinic that I was part of in Homestead, where we were there to, it's sort of like a mini driving school, but using participants' cars. So part of it, we would coach them in the car from the right seat in their own car, which is a little bit scary, but they also don't tend to drive their own car quite as hard as they would a school car, so it's not so bad. If they then request that you drive their car, to show them that you can do that, but we never drive the car hard. So I did that program, and in doing so, did a little bit of a presentation, just chalk talk basically in front of the group, and somebody at F&A, Ferrari North America, happened to be standing by and heard it and saw the enthusiasm and the fact that I was comfortable, and that kind of started that relationship. I'm lucky to be the guy that they call sometimes when they're presenting new cars. So LaFerrari, when it got shown at Pebble Beach a few years ago, even though they insisted the car wasn't there, we were there. We presented the car in this barn that from the outside was a nondescript barn. It was in an equestrian center, but you would drive past this barn 20 million times and never think anything special was inside of it. Beautiful hardwood floors. They had a bar on one end that was one solid piece of wood. Just this beautiful room, huge windows on the top of the barn. And then inside this barn, Ferrari had a platform, the LaFerrari with a red silk over it. We had the bare carbon tub that they showed at Geneva. This was actually the exact car they had shown in Geneva like a month beforehand. It was the car that we had. When you walked in this barn, it was really impressive. So I've done LaFerrari F12 TDF, I got to present for them. 458 Speciale A Aperta, the convertible version, at another house in Pebble Beach. It was amazing how they put this car in this house. But one of the neatest ones was the F12 TDF, also shown in Monterey during Car Week, also undisclosed that the car was there. It's funny, I was told, and I don't know how true this might be, that to appease folks that weren't able to get a LaFerrari, those folks got an invite to get F12 TDF. Don't know whether that's true or not, but the presentation was amazing. So they rented this home from a couple. I think the one that jutted out the furthest into the Pacific Ocean in this area of Carmel. Beautiful home, worth probably $15 or $20 million, amazing home. And then in the backyard, over their deck and over their pool, Ferrari built a deck, which was just this beautiful presentation deck. They craned the yellow, tri-coat yellow F12 TDF to the back, and that's where the presentations happen. And then in one of the couple's one of the living rooms in the house is where most of the information, the presentation started. Then we went up to the car. The car was covered in silk. You do the deal, pull the silk, there's the car, you get the oohs and ahs. And it was cool because mid-presentation, you would sometimes lose the crowd, and then you turn to look at what they were looking at, and there's a whale breaching right behind you, and you're like, all right, I would rather look at the whale than at my face, right? So that's one of the things I do for them. Driving instructor, another thing I do for them, and product specialist. And the next car that I get to work on is another really special model that we'll be presenting pretty soon here at Laguna Seca, that I probably shouldn't say what it is, but you guys can guess what it is. It's something pretty cool. Something special, I will say. So when the phone rings and it's Ferrari calling, the best thing you want to hear is that it's dynamic training, which is when we train the sales force on a car, which means they get to drive it, but we also get to give hot laps. And I thought that was sort of the coolest, but there's one above that, and that's when you get called to just go do hot laps, which has happened twice. And this particular time that I'm going to tell you a story about was 3 of the coolest work days of all time, but almost turned into 3 of the worst days of all time. So Fiat and Chrysler merged, right? The become FCA. There was this big investment week meeting that they did in Auburn Hills, and they had all their financial partners and banks and everybody from around the world flew to Auburn Hills, and it was a week-long conferences and stuff. And so I think probably to alleviate the stress of these meetings, somebody came up with the idea to have all the high-performance product on track at this demonstration track, probably just under 2 miles in length. So these people would take a break, they'd all come out, and we had the development engineer for Viper was there, they had 2 Vipers, they were giving rides in. The guy responsible for turning the Alpha 4C into the American generation car was there, giving rides in that. They had one of those. And then they had 3 Ferraris, and they sent 3 of us there. So they called me, I was in charge of putting the drivers together. They said, we need 3 of you, go and drive. And in the lead up to this, in the conference call that I had with Ferrari North America, they were a little bit vague about exactly what we'd be doing. But they asked for 3 pro drivers, and I showed up on setup day by myself. My other 2 colleagues, 2 of my best friends who also do this for a living, showed up the day after I did. And so when I showed up and I walked up to, they're still setting up the tent where everybody was going to come and line up and get ready for the hot laps. I see this logistics guy who spots me in the Ferrari shirt and comes over, and he's holding something in his hands. And as soon as he sees me, he gives me 3 sets of keys. Like it's a relief to get rid of them, and says, here they are. They're behind that tent. They're out of my hands. They're your cars now. I guess he was stressed about having the keys to these 3 Ferraris. So I walk around the tent and I have 2 FFs and an F12. Never driven an F12 before. Had a lot of experience with the FF. And I start to get a little bit giddy. My thinking is, these are our hot lap cars. So my friends show up the next day and the program starts, and I'm the lead, so I'm going to jump in the F12 first. It's pouring down rain. And so, yes, I'm going to jump in the F12, but if I said I wasn't a little bit apprehensive, I would be lying. I was actually kind of scared shitless. The track, relatively narrow, not much runoff. It's grass, so all you're going to do is accelerate when you touch that, and guardrail lined the entire way. Coming down the back straight, and and all of a sudden the car starts to turn a bit on me, and I start to turn into it a bit, and then it stops, and my heart stops with it, and it comes back, and it was that I was a passenger. I didn't do anything except counter steer a little bit, and was lucky enough to be quick enough with my hands that I gathered it up. I came back around and I was white as a ghost. The rest of that session, I gave the slowest hot laps of all time. The Alpha 4C was passing me on the back straight, but I was not going to make that call. I crashed your F12. We did this for 3 days, gave laps. And again, the other 2 guys are 2 of my best friends. And so when it was dry, I'd get out and I'd give the keys to the next guy, not to say his name. And he's like, no, you're the lead, you drive. I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm not going to share this experience with you. And he'd do a session, and then my other friend would do a session, and it was my turn again. And so, yeah, so we got to drive this F12. We just hammered them. So the FF was reaching about 155 miles an hour on the back of the straight. Talking with the Viper guys, they were doing nearly 150. The F12, 174. And sounding like God clearing his throat. Amazing. No surprise, the longest lines were to people to ride in the F12. So we finished the day, the last day, not a scratch on any of the cars. All's great. You just, anytime those programs are over, as much fun as they are stressful as well, because you're driving the car not at the limit, because a hot lap should be at 80, 85%, but near enough that if something goes wrong, it could get ugly. So you feel like you escaped. So I return the keys, I'm happy, I fly home. About a week later, I get a call from the gentleman that's sort of the in-between between Ferrari North America and us. And he says, hey, you're about to get a call from Ferrari North America. They are not happy. Apparently, you were not supposed to be driving the F12. It was a static display car, and it belongs to a customer. I honestly did not know that, right? So I'm like, all right, thanks for the warning. I hang up, and within a minute, my phone rings. And it's a gentleman at Ferrari who I was friends with, an attorney there, super good guy. But he's definitely on the limiter. He's probably heard it from somebody or been chewed out for somebody. And he didn't know that I had been warned, but he starts off like, hey, I just have some questions about the program in Auburn Hills. You guys drove all 3 cars? And I'm like, yeah, of course. We had 2 FFs and an F12, and we drove them all. Yeah, okay. How did it go? I'm like, it went really well. You know, F12, as you can imagine, proved very popular, and it rained one session, but we didn't have any issues, and da-da-da-da, and returned the cars. I oversaw the cars getting loaded on the transporter. All was great. And he goes, yeah, well, as it turns out, you weren't supposed to drive that car. And so I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it was a static display car only. You were supposed to drive the other 2. And I said, listen, there were 3 of us. I got handed 3 keys. What would you assume? He's like, no, I'm not saying that it was your fault. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this. So who gave you the keys? And I was like, it's some logistics guy that was crapping himself and just wanted to get rid of the keys. And he just said, here are your keys, here are your cars. And then he's like, okay. And what speeds did you guys reach in the car? And here, like for a second, I get that the little guy that pops up on your shoulders, and he's like, don't say what speed you got to. And the other side's like, dude, truth is the best policy. I did nothing wrong, and we didn't do anything wrong as far as we knew. And I knew exactly how fast. I would get out of the car, and when I handed the keys to my buddy, I'd be like 171. And then he'd get out of the car and head back and was like 172. So I know we did 174, the 3 of us did. And so I said, you know what? I think like, I don't know, 165, 170, something like that. And he's like, exactly 174. I forgot the cars had to have tattletales, right? So apparently the car was in delivery mode, and it was beeping a bit. Well, look, we just didn't know. I mean, I felt badly for him because I knew that he'd gotten in trouble. Somebody had to pay, but I just did. What would you do? 3 cars, 3 keys. We drove the hell out of it. And so he claimed that the car needed new tires before it went to its customer, that it had a scrape on the underbody. I'm like, dude, we never put the car off the road, and that's true. that I can't believe we weren't sliding the cars. I mean, there's guardrail everywhere. We were running with all systems off and maybe a little rotation, but no big lurid, big slides. So it surprised me that he said it needed tires, but I was like, I'm sorry, we did what we were there to do. He goes, no, you weren't wrong. I know you did what you were supposed to do. And I hung up the phone with him, and I felt badly, but we didn't do anything wrong. As it turns out, that is the last time I've driven an F12, the one and only time I've driven an F12, and it remains with the 458 Speciale. It's my favorite car. Those are my favorite. Sorry, my favorite car is an F40 or a La Ferrari or something crazy. But modern street cars, that car is amazing.